My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old. And for 7 years I had been waiting to become a mother. Not because I couldn't have biological children. I could have, but I didn't want to. I wanted to give a home to a child who didn't have one. That should have been enough. It wasn't. The judge in Portland, Oregon looked at my file across his desk and told me I was unsuitable. Not because of my income, not because of my home, not because I'd failed any home study or background check. He said I was unsuitable because of who I used to be. And then he made a call to someone. A call that cost me everything. But that call also revealed something that changed the entire case. If you've ever been told you weren't good enough, that your past made you unworthy, that the system was rigged against you, this story is for you. Let me back up. 7 years ago, I was a different person. I'm not going to hide that. I was 25 years old living in Seattle, Washington, and I was addicted to opioids. It started after my car accident in 2018, a prescription that turned into a dependency. By 2021, I'd lost my apartment, lost my job at a marketing firm, and I was living in my car in a parking garage on Pine Street. I was also going to die. That's not dramatic language. That's just what happens to people with untreated addiction. You use, you get sick, you withdraw, you use again, and eventually the math stops working. I went to rehab because my sister Claire literally drove to that parking garage and told me she would cut me out of her life forever if I didn't go. She meant it. Claire has always been the strong one, the successful one, the one who made the right choices. I was the cautionary tale. The rehab facility was in Spokane, Washington. Evergreen Recovery Center. It was 90 days of the hardest work I've ever done. 90 days of group therapy and one-on-one counseling and sitting in a room with 15 other broken people who were all just trying to figure out how to want to live again. I got sober on March 15th, 2021. I've been sober every single day since. After rehab, I did what they tell you to do. I got a sponsor. I went to meetings, usually 5 to 6 times a week. I got a job at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. Minimum wage, but it was honest work. I rented a studio apartment. I built my life back piece by piece, the way you rebuild anything when it's been broken. Slowly, carefully, asking for help, making amends. By 2024, I had been promoted to assistant manager. I was making $48,000 a year. I had a savings account with actual money in it. I had a car that ran reliably. I had Claire back in my life cautiously at first, then with real warmth. And I had this pull inside me. This need to do something that meant something. That's when I started thinking about adoption. I'd always loved kids. I'd volunteered at a youth center while I was in recovery. I'd worked with foster kids doing mentorship programs. Something about working with kids who'd experienced trauma felt like the most honest work I could do. Like maybe I could tell them, from the deepest part of my being, that things can get better, that people can change, that you're not defined by your worst moment. The adoption agency in Seattle, Children's Futures, told me my interest was wonderful. Their initial assessment was positive. I had stable housing, stable employment, good income relative to a single parent, a supportive family, no criminal record, clean drug screens. The social worker assigned to my case was a woman named Dorothy Martinez. She was 58 years old, had been doing this work for 32 years, and she had this way of looking at people like she saw all the way through them, to the actual person underneath. After my first home study visit, she sat on my couch with a cup of coffee I'd made and said, "Sarah, I've done this 3,200 times. I can tell when someone's doing this to look good, and when someone's doing this because they actually have something to give." "You're the second kind," I cried. She cried a little too. We moved through the process. I took the training classes, attachment and trauma, behavioral management, working with children who'd experienced neglect. I read books. I talked to other adoptive parents. I prepared my second bedroom not as a nursery, but as a space where a child could feel safe, could decorate, could make their own. Everything was moving forward. Then, Dorothy went to the judge's office with my full file on a Tuesday morning in June 2024. She came back that afternoon and called me into her office. She didn't sit down. That's when I knew something was wrong. "The judge has denied your application," she said. I didn't understand. I asked her why. She said she didn't have a specific legal reason. The judge had just marked it denied. He'd said I was unsuitable. He didn't elaborate, but my home study passed, I said. All my references are positive. I've been sober for 3 years. I have a job, income. I've done everything right. I know, Dorothy said, and she looked angry. Actually angry. I've never seen him do this before. He usually gives reasons. This is just a flat denial. I went home and I fell apart. I called Claire. I called my sponsor. I went to 3 meetings in a single day. I called the agency back and asked if I could appeal. Dorothy said we could try, but the judge's rulings on suitability are nearly impossible to overturn. He has discretionary power, and appellate courts rarely interfere with discretionary decisions. For 3 months, I did nothing but sit in my apartment and wonder what I'd done wrong. I rewrote my application. I had Dorothy help me. I knew every word because I was looking for the hidden problem, the thing that made me unsuitable. We never found it, but I found something else. I was on the Children's Futures website one morning, just scrolling through the other families they'd placed children with, and I clicked on a photo. It was a family with 2 kids that had been adopted through the Portland office. Portland, not Seattle. Different judge. Judge Henry Morrison. The caption said something like, "The Chen family with their adopted children, age 6 and 4, placed through Judge Morrison's jurisdiction." I recognized that name. Henry Morrison. I didn't know why I recognized it, but I did. My hands started moving without my brain directing them. I started searching. Henry Morrison, Portland judge. And then I remembered. I'd seen that name somewhere else. It took me 2 hours to find it. Buried in an old article about a real estate development in Bend, Oregon. A shopping mall expansion. Henry Morrison, judge, listed as a partial investor in a commercial property development through his wife's family trust. It wasn't illegal. It was just unusual that a judge had disclosed it publicly. But then I kept searching. Henry Morrison. Wife named Catherine Morrison. Catherine's maiden name was Larson. Larson family. Real estate developer family in Oregon. Portland area. I called Dorothy and told her what I'd found. She told me I was looking for patterns that probably didn't exist. People are connected to other people. That's just how the world works. But the way she said it was like she was trying to convince herself. 3 days later, Dorothy called me back. She said she'd done some of her own searching. She said the judges in Oregon work in a small community. They know each other. They attend the same bar association events. And she'd found something, Sarah, she said carefully. You need a lawyer. That's when I called Marcus Wells. 3 days after the motion was filed, Judge Morrison called a press conference. I'm not kidding. He actually called a press conference. He stood in the courthouse in Portland, Oregon, and he denied everything. He said the motion was malicious. He said Marcus Wells was a publicity seeker. He said Children's Futures was an activist organization with an agenda. He said my adoption application had been denied based on his professional judgment about suitability, and it had nothing to do with anything else. He said I was unsuitable. He just wouldn't say why. But here's what he didn't do. He didn't address the documents. He didn't address the phone calls. He didn't address the financial interests. He just attacked the character of the people bringing the case. And then something happened that changed everything. A reporter named James Chen, who covered the state court system for the Portland Tribune, decided to actually do his job. He started pulling court records. He started investigating Judge Morrison's financial disclosures. And he found something. Judge Morrison's wife, Catherine, had not disclosed her family's development project as a potential conflict. The financial disclosure form asked for family members' business interests. Catherine had left it blank. James wrote a story. Judge Morrison's undisclosed conflict of interest in children's services cases. The story detailed everything. The development project, the lawsuit, the judge's phone calls to the development company's lawyer, my application, the denial, the press conference that had tried to spin a clear conflict of interest as an attack on activists. The story ran on a Sunday in October 2024. By Monday morning, the state bar had opened an investigation. By Tuesday, 4 other families came forward. They'd been denied adoptions by Judge Morrison in the last 2 years. All 4 families had some connection to organizations that had, in one way or another, opposed development projects that benefited the judge's wife's family. None of them knew each other. None of them knew it was happening to anyone else. But when they saw the story, they recognized the pattern. By Wednesday, 2 lawyers filed a joint complaint requesting that Judge Morrison be temporarily suspended pending investigation. By Thursday, Judge Morrison resigned, just walked away. Didn't apologize, didn't admit wrongdoing, just resigned from the bench, effective immediately. The State Bar continued their investigation anyway. By January 2025, they had documented a pattern of judicial misconduct dating back 6 years. Judge Morrison had consistently made decisions that benefited organizations connected to his wife's family. He'd approved real estate projects. He'd denied environmental appeals. He'd made rulings on commercial disputes that went in favor of Larson family interests. He was formally censured. He was fined $50,000. He was banned from practicing law in Oregon for 7 years. And my adoption case? It was transferred to Judge Eleanor Washington, who reviewed my file on her second day in the role. It took her 20 minutes to approve it. On November 2, 2024, I walked into an adoption hearing in Portland, Oregon. Judge Washington was a Black woman in her 60s with silver hair and these incredibly kind eyes. She read my file. She said, "Ms. Mitchell, I've reviewed all the documentation. Your home study was exemplary. Your character references are exceptional. You have been sober for more than 3 years. You have maintained employment and housing. You have completed all required training. Do you still wish to adopt?" "Yes," I said. My voice was shaking. "I do." "Then it is my pleasure to grant your petition for adoption," Judge Washington said. "I'm sorry for the delay. I'm sorry for the injustice. But you are absolutely suitable, Ms. Mitchell. You're going to be an excellent mother." I sobbed. Claire, who was sitting behind me, sobbed. Dorothy Martinez, who'd believed in me the whole time, sobbed. 6 weeks later, I met a little girl named Emma. Emma was 8 years old. She'd been in foster care for 5 years. She'd experienced severe neglect. She had attachment issues and trauma responses and behavioral difficulties. She had been passed over by multiple families because she was too challenging. I knew exactly what she was. I was 8 years old once, too. Different circumstances, but the same question underneath. The question of whether you were worth keeping. When I first met Emma, she wouldn't look at me. She sat on her foster mother's couch with her arms crossed and her face turned away. I didn't try to make her like me. I just sat there, and I told her about me. I told her I'd been broken. I told her I'd made mistakes. I told her that I'd gotten sober and I'd rebuilt my life. And I told her that I understood what it felt like to think nobody wanted you. She looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were so old. "So tired. Did people give up on you?" she asked quietly. "A lot of them did," I said. "But some didn't. Some people believed I could change. Some people kept showing up. And that made the difference. Will you give up on me?" she asked. "No," I said. "Never." On March 15, 2025, exactly 4 years to the day after I got sober, the adoption was finalized. Emma became legally mine, and I became legally hers. We celebrated at Claire's house. My sponsor came. Dorothy came. Marcus came. Emma got a cake with her name on it. She sat at that table, and she ate cake. And she looked around at all these people who were there specifically because they wanted to celebrate her. And I watched something shift in her face. She started to believe it. That she was worth keeping. That people could actually stay. Here's what I want you to understand. This story isn't really about Judge Morrison, or the corruption or the legal case. It's about a system that was so broken that it took an entire investigation, and a journalist, and 4 families, and a resignation to fix something that should have been obvious. Emma has been home for 10 months now. We're in therapy together. She's doing better at school. She's started trusting me, not all the way, but incrementally. Every day is a negotiation, but it's a negotiation with someone who wants her to win. Sometimes she asks me about my past, why I was using, why I hurt myself, and I tell her the truth. I tell her that I was sick, that I got help, that I'm not that person anymore. But I also tell her that being that person, surviving that person, it made me able to understand her in ways other people maybe couldn't. My past didn't make me unsuitable. It made me necessary. Judge Morrison tried to use his power to protect his family's profit. But what he actually did was expose the fact that the system protecting children was compromised. What he did was force change, and what I did was survive. I stayed sober. I stayed patient. I let other people help me, and I got exactly what I was fighting for.